Tony D and Little Joan with a comic book writer's take on AlphaCore from the Ripperverse and from Chuck Dixon. Smash, like, and subscribe. Thank you for smash, liking, and subscribing. Check out my books. Links in the description. Comedy Horror in South Jersey. It's the Pineys, books 1 through 13, available at Amazon.com. Okay, so as I suspected, the AlphaCore is vastly superior to Isom in terms of the writing. Again, I'm not an artwork guy, but the artwork was pretty solid. I would say it's more solid. It's kind of hard to tell when you're reading. The flow is just so good with the writing and the events. Everything just kind of flows right into the next thing, and that's the way it should be. Chuck Dixon knows what he's doing. Bottom line. This was called AlphaCore. It's about AlphaCore. Isom's not in it. There's not a million other characters mentioned that are necessary. All the characters that are mentioned are in the plot. So there are other superhero characters, to be sure, supervillains, you'd say, but they are the guys AlphaCore fight or fight with. And the basic pitch, you can hear this. This is a military-style superhero team. You know, kind of the idea being like, if the military and the U.S. government and the state governments got together and had superheroes, how would they actually use them? Right? So there's cops, and they have rules, and they have a uniform. They're all dressed in sort of military fatigues. And they're different, but the differences are subtle, small, which is nice too. You got three main characters here, and they each have their own powers. The one guy in the middle is kind of like Superman. The girl is sort of, I don't know what her exact powers are. I guess she's kind of like, she's got some kind of energy whips, kind of like almost like a Wonder Woman, sort of. And then Braxwell, the guy in the background, he's the most notable. He doesn't talk. It kind of has like a Snake Eyes vibe to him, but he can fly too, and he's got, I'm not sure what his powers are. I guess he's kind of like Superman as well. He's got that helmet and the visor. I'm not sure, but it kind of doesn't matter because their personalities come out. Braxwell doesn't talk. He's kind of the strong, silent type. The middle dude, he's the cool sort of military brash guy. He kind of knows the lay of the land. He just moves forward. He's about completing the mission. Doom, doom, doom. Kind of doesn't totally obey the rules. The girl's more of a rule follower. So you've got all these personalities, and it all comes out in the dialogue and in the action. There's no luxuriating in, the scenes. They're just boom, boom, boom. Here's what you need to know. Here's the next thing. Here's the next thing. So AlphaCore, the superhero team, has been hired, I guess, by the state to be the answer to the superpowered people, right? The Excepts, as they call them. And that word works slightly better in this. Maybe it's just the way the dialogue was written. But so when there is an Except in the city, the Texas city of Floor-Spark, I don't like that name. To me, like, a Texas city should have a name like, San Carlos or San this or San that, like a Hispanic type name, like a Spanish type name. But whatever. So they are called in, and this is the non-spoiler review. I forgot to say at the beginning. I do the non-spoiler and the spoiler review. So they get called in, and then there's a plot of people who are working behind the scenes to destroy AlphaCore, take over the city, do various nefarious things. And there are a lot of characters introduced, but they work because each one is sort of a function of the crimes they're committing. That's why you create the characters. You don't say, hey, I created this character, now how I could use them. What you should do is say, okay, these guys are going to do this nefarious plan. what kind of superpower would work for them to use it in this case. That's the way you do it. You make the characters service the story. It makes it a lot easier. Um, and that's what Chuck's done here. Now, you can also reverse engineer and say, well, I have these characters. How can we make it work as a story? But the more detail you put in without putting it in the story, the more you have to work at making that integrate well. I'm not sure which way these guys were created, but doesn't matter. Chuck knows what he's doing. He's in the driver's seat. He's taking you from point A to point B. Boom, boom, boom. Real solid stuff. I would read another issue of this, sure. This is the kind of launch the Rippaverse needed. This introduced 3 main heroes, kind of a 4th, and a bunch of villains, and, you know, I'm on board. I'm on board with this. Sure, I'd read this. Absolutely, 100%. There's all kinds of places to go. You didn't have to get bogged down in telling me a bunch of details that didn't facilitate the story. I don't know where these guys live, or, you know, other than they probably live in this giant floating thing in the sky. That's part of the story. But, you know, I don't necessarily know the background of every single character, but I know enough about them that facilitated the story. You know, there's a scene with the middle guy. I already forgot his name, but the middle guy, and he, you know, there's a guy who's his boss, his commanding officer, and they act like 2 military guys talking, although the other guy's more of a police sergeant, captain type, and they have that kind of dynamic, and that's a dynamic you can wrap your brain around, even though it's superheroes. So this 100% works, and I recommend it. Yeah, this is the good one. Eric July should take a step back and let Chuck Dixon either school him on how to write comics, or hire somebody else, or hire someone like Chuck or Chuck to overhaul everything. Because if every comic came out like this, he'd have something. He'd have a Rippaverse that was chugging along. You know, the editing, the editors came in terms of, like, when you're doing these giant superhero worlds and world building, what the editors' functions were, besides the individual comics and checking spelling and things like that, their job was to check to see if the events in the current books, as they came out, they were more, you know, monthly, but in this case, you would just have to check to make sure the events jibe, right? So if Isom, I don't know, gets blasted by a dude and it burns off all his hair, you want to make sure he's bald in all the stories that take place after that, right? And if it's a scene that takes place before that, you want to make sure he has hair, because that's the way he normally looks. So that's the kind of stuff editors would do. They would call people out if they made that mistake, and those mistakes get made. And that's why you need editors to deal with that stuff, because at Marvel it was like, well, Captain America just fought with the Avengers. Now we're doing his regular book, Captain America, and now he's going to be in this fight, so it has to start with him getting off the Quinjet and then going into the new situation. And then there usually was a note in the comic, something like, this takes place after the events of Avengers 125. Now, starting, we don't really need that. I mean, this is the first issue. But going forward, with so many characters in the Rippaverse, you're going to need someone to keep track of all this stuff. You're going to need someone whose job it is to say, okay, here are the characters, here's where we last left them, in what issue we last saw them. So, you know, otherwise you're going to have to keep sending out comics to all the talent, because they have to know where everybody is. So it's all, the continuity works. because you want a good continuity. People like that. This has a very good internal continuity. It didn't tie in to the event in Isom. This was completely separate from that, which was weird because I fully expected that the fight scene that happened in Isom was going to be expanded upon here, and ideally it probably should have, like, but the one in Isom was kind of out of left field. She attacks Isom seemingly for no reason, drops him on a car, and then the AlphaCore guys are there and to help him a little bit. But the AlphaCore, solid, very solid. Chuck Dixon knows what he's doing. He understands police work. He understands how it rolls out. He understands how the criminals work. Like, the criminals were talking about their schemes, and they're like saying things that make sense, that are smart. All right, I got to get down into the nitty gritty of this. All right, so here's the spoiler review. Okay, if you want to read this, go read it. Now I'm going to get into spoilers. Here we go. First act. Starts out on action. Another technique in comic books. Starts out right at the first bank robbery, and you got a guy with a bomb, and he's got a hostage, and AlphaCore shows up, or the middle guy does, takes care of business. But there's more to it than that, right? This guy had a very sophisticated bomb. He's kind of stupid, even though AlphaCore saves him and he's thrown in jail. He's connected in some other way to the criminals, which are later revealed. He is a liability now because AlphaCore did something. And also, too, he wasn't supposed to do it. He wasn't supposed to get involved because the guy with the bomb and the hostage was normal. They're only supposed to get involved if there's an except, a superpowered person. But he's kind of like that, and this introduces his personality. The important thing is I save people, which is true. And I sort of was rooting for this guy, going, yeah, he saved people, you jerks. All your bureaucratic red tape. So it's setting it up so we can have that sort of dynamic from like a cop movie, from Lethal Weapon. Riggs, you're out of control. You're a loose cannon. So that's what he is. He's the loose cannon on the team. He stopped the bank robbery, even though he's not supposed to, but he has the powers to do it. But if he had screwed it up, he probably would have been in big trouble, right? So, and they have to worry about their funding, which is another thing that gets mentioned. So he stops that. The bomber goes to jail. He goes back to the flying ship where the superheroes live. And it's all military guys. Everybody working there is military. They're in uniforms. They're walking around. And then there's some cops too, or a guy who looks like a cop, but it's kind of a green uniform. But it gives you the sense of this is something, And again, it's 3 acts. It's act 1, 2, and 3 with a big ending. So this is the first act. First act is bomb goes off, but why did he have a bomb? Why he wasn't smart enough to build this bomb. Why was he robbing the bank? There's a mystery. So they're trying to solve the mystery, and meanwhile, there's another call, and the pacing is very breathless too. There are all these calls. Now they get a real call. There's like a hillbilly who can shoot electricity at a motel somewhere, and the cops are trying to arrest his girlfriend, and this time they have a legitimate call to AlphaCore, and so they go, and they show up and fight the electric hillbilly, or Braxton does in the background, and he does the smart thing, which is instead of getting to a big punch out with him, since he shoots electricity, Braxton, there's bottle of water or something. He steps on it really hard, and it shoots into him, short circuits him. There's a big fight with the cops, and he trashes them all, but Braxton's able to stop him. So they capture him, throw him in jail. Meanwhile, the villains, who I'm not sure if they have superpowers or not. I think one of them does. I think the girl has superpowers. It's a couple. and they've got some nefarious plan. And she asks him, "Why did you want to blow up a bank? Like, if you're desperate for cash, whatever." He says, "No, there was something in the bank. I was trying to hide for some reason." Uh, See, it's all like machinations going on. This is what was missing from Ison. There's no real machinations. The plan's not clear. Their plan is clear. He had to hide what was in the safe deposit bank box in the bank, and then his plan to blow it up goes awry, and now it's more complicated. Now he has to get rid of the loose ends. So now he has to get rid of the guy who got captured with the bomb. At the same time, there's a civilian dude who's like a lawyer who's his deal is he's exploiting the presence of AlphaCore to say, oh, these people are a menace, and we need to help poor people who have been unduly prosecuted by the cops. And so he's working that angle somehow. So he represents the bomb guy, and then he represents the hillbilly guy too, Electric Hillbilly. That's not his name. I forgot what he was called. And but then the lead bad guy, I guess he contacts the Electric Hillbilly somehow, or through the lawyer, says, "Yeah, have the Electric Hillbilly kill that dude," and he does while he escapes. But there's still the problem of the bank. So the lead bad guy says, "Well, I hired another guy." Well, the girl bad guy says, "Tell your guy not to go now." But the guy he hires is such an idiot. He gets the message late. He's sort of like, he's another hillbilly. He's kind of like a fire hillbilly. He's more of a hillbilly than the electric guy. The woman hires a guy who's way more subtle. He's got some kind of crazy mind powers. He can get whatever. He can look at you and you obey him. So he goes into the bank, and the guy who runs the bank lets him right in. He takes the package, leaves a hard drive, and leaves the bank unscathed. AlphaCore eventually catches up to them because they're solving the mystery. They don't catch up to him. They catch up to the bank. They realize there's something in that bank. They end up in a fight with the hillbilly. They don't beat him, which is a good switch too, right? You think, oh, it's going to be a fight between our main dude and the fire dude, but he actually gets beat by the fire dude. And then he goes into the bank vault to get the safe deposit box, and the bank manager closes the door because he understands the physics of fire. So the moment he closes his door, the hillbilly guy's like, "Oh, I'm gonna fire up and get myself out of here," but it's airtight. He burns up all the oxygen, passes out. So again, clever stuff, right? You don't see that coming. Like, it's the bank manager that saves the day, not these guys. It's because every character is playing at the height of their intelligence. You could see that happening. Yeah, the bank manager doesn't have superpowers, but he knows that fire burns up the oxygen in the room. So from there, they get the hard drive, but as it turns out, switcheroo, the hard drive's a trap, and they take it back to AlphaCore, and our brash Superman wannabe says, "Oh, come on, let's figure out what this does." And like, "Oh, I don't know, it could have malware on it or whatever." It's no big deal. Let's just put it in. And he just puts it right in the computer. It says, "Fortune favors the bold," or something like that. Well, of course, it hacks the entire complex, and now it's set on a collision course with the police station, and they have to stop it. At the same time, Braxton has to capture the guy who put the hard drive there, the mind guy, and they protect him because they realize all he has to do is talk to you. So in Braxton's helmet, he plays music so he can't hear what he's saying, and then he captures him. But then he gets caught up in another fight, and the cops have to come in, but I think they capture him. That went a little unresolved, but seemed to imply they were captured. But then Braxton's called to, you got to help, the flying fortress is going to crash. So then the big ending. The big ending is the bad guys have set the giant flying fortress on a crash course to the police plaza where all the police live, and they have to stop it. So there was another character introduced named Wilkins, who was a regular cop, but he has some amount of superpower, but he just kept it a secret and he never really worked on it. And his power only affects metal. So the giant thing's coming, so Wilkins sacrifices himself in the big ending to stop the giant flying fortress from crashing on police headquarters. It stops short. He saves a bunch of people, but he dies in the process. So you get this great heroic ending in the third act. And that's the third act. And then the AlphaCore also confronts their two reoccurring villains, I think, as they get on a private plane. There's nothing to connect them to this, of course, but they vow, we're going to get you one day, kind of thing. So it's a setup for the rest of the series. It's going to be AlphaCore versus these two rich people who manipulate things and make money and, hire other super idiots to do their bidding. Even though I think the woman has superpowers, I'm not sure about the man. He might. He had glowing eyes at one point towards the end. So they're just sort of teasing you what might come. And what's going to come is AlphaCore trying to do the right thing as a military and police organization of some kind. And these rich a-holes trying to, commit these crimes and various schemes and using probably the government against them at all times. So it's always like the heroes are always sacrificing in this journey. They're trying to do these noble things, and meanwhile, the villains, they don't care about anybody. They just care about themselves. Although I expected one of the characters, the man of the couple, to die. I kind of thought that might happen. I thought she might kill him at the end to cover her tracks, but apparently they're a couple, so they're good. But maybe in the future, who knows? So, plenty of characters here. You had 1, 2, 3, like 4 or 5 villains. A little sidekick guy who dies and sacrifices himself. And you got you introduce the 3 main guys. You get a good taste of them. It's something you can build upon. Something you can build upon. Enough that, it was a solid plot. It was like a movie. You could take this entire graphic novel and make a movie. Or certainly a first episode of a 1-hour TV show. Yeah. It would work as that. And that's the format I say Eric July needs to adopt going forward with ISOM. He needs to adopt a 3-act structure and stick to it, because he's kind of all over the place with ISOM. Too many 1-acts. Everything has to be there for a reason. You don't introduce a character just because, hey, this is a cool guy who could shoot beams out of his eyes. He has to be there for a reason. The Electric Hillbilly was there, and I keep calling him that. That's not his name, but he was there to get arrested, so then the bad guy could hire him to kill the bomber. That's what he was there for. And then later, they had to capture him again. So these bad guys are hiring other superpowered guys who don't have money, but they have talents and they want the money. So it's all that greed and, so you can see their motivations. And out of the dialogue's different. You've got your main superhero, Superman type. He's brash, kind of doesn't follow the rules. The girl totally follows the rules. Braxton's a little more mysterious because he doesn't talk, but he's smart. I don't know why he doesn't talk, so I'm sure they'll be explaining that another time. I like the aesthetic that they're all military guys. That's another thing Dixon usually excels at when he has military or quasi-military guys in his comic. He understands, like I said, he's the Tom Clancy of comics. He knows that stuff. He knows cops. He knows military. He's done enough research that even if this stuff is total BS, it sounds good. That's really the key to writing a story. It has to sound good. Yeah, maybe a real cop would be like, "Oh, we'd never do that." A real military guy would go, "No, that's not the way it goes." But you know, most people aren't going to know every little minutia of military and law enforcement stuff. And this is also a superhero world, so the rules do change somewhat. So there is a little, room for suspension of disbelief. Um, so yeah, you can build off of this. Obviously, in the next issue, AlphaCore has to deal with their terrible accident. I think your main guy here, he's in big trouble because he's the one who shoved the hard drive into the computer, which caused the problem. I think he may get demoted or chewed out or whatever. Who knows? Who knows where this could go? It's very early on in the storyline. It could be that, he gets fired and becomes a villain and they put a completely different guy in there. That would be interesting. It could be they have dozens of guys in the military with superpowers that they've been developing for years, and now he's out. That's never been done before, I don't think. I mean, who knows? It could be the sort of thing where AlphaCore members very rarely stay, and they constantly switch them out. I don't think so. I don't get that vibe from it, but I like the idea of a military operation because it's different. It's not a lot of there were a couple. They had one, and they had a couple in Valiant comics that were sort of this way. They had one group of guys. I think they were normal army guys, but they had tech that gave them kind of superpowers. And then they had a comic called Hardcore, Corps, which wasn't bad. I kind of liked it, but people kept dying in it. That Mike Barron ended up on it towards the end of the run. It kind of didn't take off the way it should have. I think it started shaky and then took a while to get going. But this, solid. So out of the three things I see from the Rip reviews, I saw 1, 2, and this is miles superior. Miles in terms of the writing. Again, I don't see any problem with the art, but I'm not an art guy. The art I want has to be functional, although there was some great moments. I mean, with the Electric Hillbilly and the other Fire Hillbilly, I mean, they were fun. They had good visual stuff going on with their eyes and their crazy powers. I also liked the guy who could talk you into things because he didn't have anything. He was just dressed, he was a fat guy in normal clothes, and he'd just smile at you and just start giving you instructions. So you've got a mix of powers, a mix of stuff going on. You've got different things at different levels. So you've got the military aspect. You've got criminals who are playing at the height of their intelligence. One of the first things the criminals say is something like, at first, "Oh, don't worry, I got a guy on it," and then later, when that doesn't work, the female in the couple is like, "Oh, you may put us at risk." So you can tell that implies they have a plan of several different layers of buffer in case something goes wrong. And then you understand why AlphaCore confronts them at the end of the comic, because it's kind of like sending them a message: we're on to you. We're going to be looking at you, and we're eventually going to get you. Right now we can't, but soon we're going to come at you. They don't know or have any proof they committed all these attacks and whatnot, but they're going to find out eventually, and eventually you'll maybe have some new bad guys or whatever. So that's the way this rolls. That's the way bad guys roll. Bad guys, they're like super in command. They've got lots of money, lots of power, lots of firepower, and they're seemingly invincible until someone takes them down. And they go down one of two ways. Either they get killed, which is fairly common. Somebody kills them. Either they want their territory or whatnot, or they're just killed because it's like, oh, you're a liability to somebody higher up or somebody near you. So that's why I thought the woman might kill the other dude. And then the other way, of course, is they get caught and they go to jail. They may still get killed, or they may go to jail and then try to continue to operate their devious plans from prison. But in a comic book, what usually happens is they either escape, or then they get superpowers, or they use their powers to escape, or whatever. But it's somewhere along the lines you introduce new guys, new potential threats, who maybe are also threats to the status quo in the criminal underworld, and then maybe they take over later downstream. And so AlphaCore has new villains who are even worse than the last villains, and that's the way you want to ramp it up. So good on you, Eric July. And Chuck Dixon writes a nice letter in the back of the comic about Eric July, very supportive. Again, I'm supportive of Eric July too. I just would like to see him less on the internet. I mean, I think it's not helping him. It might be helping his YouTube channel, but I don't think the Civil War on the right side of comics is the way to go. And looking at the way it's lining up, you've got a lot of people here in the mix. I'm not sure it's a good idea to continue this. I know Yellow Flash maybe didn't pay this guy, and he may have lost his house because of it. But I assume that guy is a grown man who made a decision, he took a chance, and it kind of blew up in his face. Again, if he knew the risk, I don't see any problem with that. To some extent, Ethan Van Sciver is right. You shouldn't take on jobs for a percentage normally. Not normally. It's something you could do. Like if you have a regular gig and then you're drawing in your spare time, sure, because that's going to be extra money and you want to maximize it. But if you're drawing full time and you've got no money coming in, you better make sure you have enough savings to survive. And so, again, the Civil War is not very constructive to anything. What is constructive is focusing on the comics that are doing well, that work. This one works. This one is the one that should be the focus of the Ripperverse now. Isom, it's not coming together yet. It introduced a lot of characters, but it's not really about Isom. It's about introducing character after character after character. You could keep it going. I get the love. That's probably his baby, and he loves it, and it's kind of him. But it's not working. So you need to kick up the writing game big time, soon. You can't mess around. At some point, the sales are going to start to slide off. I would expect the sales for AlphaCore to go up. I would read a second episode of this. Absolutely. Now, my finances are kind of tight that I can't afford $20 comics, but maybe if he offered it online for like $5 and, in a PDF format or something, I'd probably check it out just to keep up with it, but who knows? Who knows what's going down? So, yes, on AlphaCore. Nice job, Chuck Dixon. I mean, the experience shows. The experience shows. And again, as far as the Civil War in comics, on the right side of comics goes, I'm not participating in the drama, I don't think. I'm not trying to anyway. I hope things just eventually settle down and maybe these guys bury the hatchet sometime in the future and go back to being on each other's podcast and doing whatever they do, And I hope things work out with Yellow Flash's artist. I really do. I hope he completes the book and it's successful. I don't know. There's a lot of comics coming out from the independent world. I wish them well, but I also urge those people, if they're not writers or they're very inexperienced writers, you should think about hiring an editor or hiring a writer or both. Just think about it. Or maybe a consultant. I'm not suggesting myself, but yeah, I do that for money. But, I've seen the difference between guys who have screenplays or scripts that are terrible versus when they get something that's very coherent and clear. And it's also about clarity. When you read Isom, it's not very clear. There's a lot going on. It feels confusing. This couldn't be more clear. It goes forward and it never stops. It goes, man, beginning, hits the ground running, and boom, shoots down the road. That's what you need in most screenplays and comics, with some exceptions. There's a few genres where maybe that's not what you want to do. But in comics and superhero comics, oh yeah, you absolutely want to do that. And look, you could say, well, it's formulaic. It started with a bank robbery and a guy holding a girl hostage. Yeah, it is, but it works. The formulas work to a degree, and it's not really a formula, it's a format. You start with action. You start in the middle of action. And it wasn't like 2 weeks ago. It was in the moment. So you have a number of options to you. But you want to start with something exciting and thrilling. This was an exciting and thrilling comic. I didn't know what was going to happen. There was a lot going on, but it integrated well. And I look forward to the next. Okay, that's it for me, Tony D and Little Joan. Check us out on Odysee, Bitchute, and Rumble for a more base takes. If you can find a more base take, I say take it. I'll be at Valenzano Winery on Friday from 4 to 6 for my talk on how to hunt the Jersey Devil. Hope to see you there. We'll see you tomorrow.